Before the cold aisle at the pharmacy existed, there was something else. Farmhouses across Lancaster County, Holmes County, and the river-bottom settlements of Indiana had medicine that came not from a factory, but from a cellar shelf. A kitchen garden, a bundle of dried herbs hung above the wood stove through the autumn months. You got sick. Someone in the family knew exactly what to do. No box, no bottle with a warning label in tiny print. Somewhere in the last 100 years, most of that was quietly set aside. The corner drugstore arrived first, then the chain pharmacy, then the cure of the season packaged in foil and marketed with a sunrise. The old remedies did not disappear because they failed. They disappeared because something more convenient came to replace them, and convenience has a way of winning even when it should not. Today, we are going back. 20 forgotten Amish cold remedies that worked before anyone sold you a pill for it. Boneset. Tea. The plant grew wild in the damp meadows of Pennsylvania and Ohio, and if you were raised in an Amish household in the 19th century, you knew its name the way you knew your own. Eupatorium perfoliatum was called boneset for an old belief that it eased the bone-deep aching that came with high fevers. Amish families dried the aerial parts in summer, stored them in cloth bags above the kitchen, and brewed them into a strong, bitter tea at the first sign of serious illness. The liquid was dark, intensely bitter, even when sweetened with honey, and it warmed the whole chest going down. By the 1840s, boneset was listed in the United States Pharmacopoeia, and physicians were prescribing it for influenza, catarrh, and bronchitis. An 1847 medical publication documented its value specifically for respiratory ailments. It faded across the mid-20th century as families left farms and no longer had access to the meadows where boneset grew. What they had made each season cost nothing but the afternoon it took to dry it. Elderberry blossom and peppermint tea. This was the stomach flu remedy, made when illness came with nausea and chills together, when the body wanted to collapse before it had even fully caught fire. Amish healers combined equal parts dried elderberry blossoms and crushed peppermint leaves and steeped a heaping teaspoon in a cup of boiling water and strained it carefully to remove plant matter. It was drunk 1 cup every hour until the worst passed. The elderberry blossom has a faint sweet herbal scent, and the peppermint cut through it with something almost medicinal. Elder's medicinal use runs deep. It appears in writings attributed to Hippocrates and was documented among Native American tribes across the eastern woodlands. When Amish settlers found the elder at forest edges, they recognized a plant their Swiss and German ancestors had already relied upon across the Atlantic. The combination with peppermint appears repeatedly in Amish collections from the 19th century. Elderberry became a mainstream wellness trend around 2019. The Amish never stopped using it. Onion. Chest poultice. Onions went into a pan, diced fine, combined with roughly half their volume in salt, and heated until the mixture was warm and pungent enough to water the eyes from across the room. The mixture was wrapped in cloth and laid directly on the chest, sometimes the back as well, and held in place until it cooled. Amish grandmothers brought it out for serious chest colds and for cases that had the look of viral pneumonia. The remedy shows up in household records from Ohio and Indiana settlements dating to the late 1800s. It fell away as commercial chest rubs became widely affordable in the early 20th century, and as the judgment about when something was serious enough for a poultice gave way to the simpler act of buying a tin at the store. The smell of it, sulfur and warmth and something unmistakably of the root cellar, stayed with anyone who received it and never quite let go. Mustard plaster. Before pharmaceutical companies, there was the mustard plaster, and the medical establishment used it without apology. Dried mustard powder was mixed with flour and water into a thick paste, spread onto cloth and laid on the chest over a thin layer of fabric to prevent burns. Mustard is a rubefacient, drawing blood to the skin surface, increasing local circulation and loosening mucus in congested airways. Physicians considered this frontline medicine well into the 20th century. Amish families in Lancaster County and the Kishocoquillas Valley of Pennsylvania made mustard plasters from the same seed they grew for the table. Because the line between food and medicine was not always a clear one in those households. It disappeared when two-income and smaller households meant no one was present through the night to monitor the plaster and remove it before it blistered. The smell of it going on was sharp and green and slightly aggressive. The garlic, honey, and lemon tonic. Raw garlic, raw honey, and fresh lemon juice, combined in whatever proportions the maker preferred, was one of the most consistently documented Amish cold remedies across every settlement from the 1800s forward. The garlic was crushed fine, so the allicin released fully. The honey had to be raw from a local hive if possible, because commercial processing removes most of what made it useful in this context. Lemon provided acidity, the ability to cut through mucus in the throat. Some families added grated fresh ginger. Some added a pinch of cayenne. The tonic was taken by the spoonful at onset and repeated through the day. A 2024 study in a peer-reviewed microbiology journal examining what researchers called the Amish amoxicillin recipe found a garlic and vinegar-based tonic showed antimicrobial activity against Staphylococcus aureus in laboratory conditions. That is a long way from a clinical claim. But it is not nothing, and it did not surprise anyone who grew up taking it. Mullein tea. Mullein grew tall and silver-leafed at field edges, a biennial plant with leaves like thick felt and a flower spike that rose 6 feet in its second year. The leaves were dried and brewed into tea, strained through fine muslin to remove the tiny hairs that irritated the throat. The tea was mild, slightly sweet, almost pleasant, nothing like boneset. It was used for dry, non-productive coughs and deep chest congestion. Native Americans across the eastern continent had been using mullein for respiratory conditions for centuries before Amish settlement, and colonists quickly adopted it into home practice. Amish herb gardens in Ohio and Indiana routinely included mullein by the late 1800s, and it was considered especially appropriate for children because of its gentle action. When farm households stopped cultivating their own herb plots across the mid-20th century, knowledge of mullein preparation disappeared from families that no longer grew the plant. Today, it requires deliberate recovery. Tobacco. Salve. The preparation was serious work. Cheap pipe tobacco, raisins, and lard simmered slowly together for 3 to 3.5 hours. Then it cooled, was strained through cloth, and stored in small tins. The salve was rubbed onto the chest for pneumonia and deep chest colds. Elizabeth Coblentz, who wrote the Amish Cook column for newspapers across the country for decades, recorded an account from the 1950s. A healer in her community prepared this salve, a family member used it, and the illness cleared. The slow rendering was believed to extract something useful from the tobacco while leaving behind what made smoking it harmful. Tobacco had a documented external medicine history stretching back centuries, used as a drawing agent by Native American communities long before commercial cigarettes. It disappeared from household practice as the cultural association between tobacco and lung disease made any form of it, including an external preparation, unwelcome in most American homes. Horehound syrup. White horehound belongs to the mint family, and if you have ever tasted it, you know immediately it was not chosen for its flavor. Intensely bitter, aromatic, slightly mentholated. Amish families grew it specifically for winter illness and simmered fresh or dried plant in water, combining the strained liquid with honey to produce a syrup taken by the spoonful for coughs. A stronger version, documented in Appalachian and rural Pennsylvania communities, dissolved 4 sticks of horehound candy in a pint of whiskey and called for a couple of spoonfuls a day through the illness. An 1873 medical publication noted horehound was long established as a remedy for children's coughs, a strong decoction sweetened with honey being considered excellent treatment. It was listed in multiple editions of the United States Pharmacopoeia through the 19th century. The candy survived longer than the syrup, going from medicine to confection to forgotten. Today, most Americans under 40 have never tasted it. Apple cider vinegar and honey drink. In Amish households from Pennsylvania to Indiana to the scattered settlements of Kansas and Iowa, the vinegar and honey drink was bedtime medicine. A tablespoon or two of raw apple cider vinegar in warm water with a spoon of honey, taken before sleep. Mary Schrock, who grew up Amish in the Midwest and recorded the experience in published memoirs, noted that vinegar water and honey at bedtime was as consistent and unremarkable a part of the cold season routine as pulling on extra socks. It was not a dramatic intervention. It was maintenance. The fermented vinegar Amish families made from autumn apple harvests was a genuine, unpasteurized product, bearing little resemblance to the filtered clear product that replaced it on most American tables by mid-century. The practice faded as bottled cold medicines consolidated their place in the household, and the routine of preparing something each night gave way to a measured dose from a foil packet. The clear kind was for cleaning windows. Saltwater gargle. There is nothing exotic about a saltwater gargle, and that is exactly the point. A teaspoon of salt in a glass of warm water, gargled for 30 seconds, repeated several times a day when the throat was raw. It was the most universally documented cold remedy across all Amish settlements. Mary Schrock noted it was her least favorite of all the remedies her parents required, and that they required it regardless. Hypertonic saline draws fluid from swollen throat tissue through osmosis, reducing inflammation and temporarily clearing the passage. It is also mildly antiseptic. The Amish did not know the word osmosis, but they observed the results and passed the remedy on, generation to generation, without anyone needing to explain the mechanism. It remains the first recommendation from a physician when you call the nurse line with a sore throat today. Some knowledge does not need a revival. It never actually left. Raw onion cough syrup. Here is where I want to ask you something genuinely. Did someone in your family ever make this? Did you watch the layers go down into the jar and wonder what on earth they thought they were doing? Thin slices of raw onion layered with sugar in a glass jar, covered tightly and left overnight. By morning, the sugar had drawn the liquid from the onion cells. The jar held a thin, golden brown syrup that smelled powerfully of onion but tasted, once you were brave enough, primarily of sweet with a warm afterburn. A tablespoon every few hours for a cough. Variations added honey, lemon, or a pinch of thyme between the layers. Documented in Amish household remedy books in Ohio and Pennsylvania through the early 20th century. It gave way as the authority of printed drug labels replaced the authority of grandmothers and handwritten remedy books, and as cough syrups with measured dosages made an overnight preparation feel unnecessarily complicated. Slippery elm bark tea. The inner bark of the slippery elm tree, Ulmus rubra, produces a mucilage when it contacts water, a thick, slippery gel that coats the throat with immediate and noticeable relief. Native Americans in the northeastern woodlands used slippery elm medicinally for centuries, and colonists arriving in the 1600s and the 1700s adopted it so quickly that it was among the first native plant remedies to enter widespread colonial use. By the 19th century, it was listed in the United States Pharmacopoeia. Amish communities in Pennsylvania and Ohio used it for the raw, scratched-feeling throat of a head cold, steeping powdered bark in warm water and sipping slowly. Thayer's slippery elm throat lozenges, manufactured in the 1800s, now rest in the collection of the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. The home preparation disappeared when commercial lozenges offered the same relief without the brewing or the straining. It tasted faintly of starch and nothing unpleasant, which in a sick person was sometimes exactly enough. Vinegar socks. This one sounds improbable until you hear the logic, and then it still sounds improbable but in a more interesting way. For fever, particularly in children, Amish households soaked cotton socks in apple cider vinegar, wrung them out, and placed them on the sick person's feet before sleep. The cooling evaporation was believed to draw heat down and out through the feet as the body tried to equalize its temperature. Documented in Indiana and Ohio communities, in use well into the 20th century. The feet, dense with blood vessels close to the surface, were frequently targeted in folk medicine for treatments meant to affect the whole body. The practice fell away after aspirin became widely available in rural stores after 1899, and later as pediatric acetaminophen eliminated fever management as a nighttime problem requiring improvised intervention. What the remedy cost was nothing. What it required was someone awake and willing to do it at 3 in the morning when a child was burning. Yarrow and elderflower fever tea. Yarrow, Achillea millefolium, was a fixture in Amish kitchen gardens not for eating but for fevers. Combined with dried elderflower, which has a diaphoretic effect, it was the standard fever remedy in Swiss German Amish households, a practice brought directly from European tradition. A diaphoretic herb promotes sweating, and the belief was that sweating was the body's mechanism for breaking a fever, that the heat needed a way out. The combination with peppermint was common in Indiana settlements by the late 1800s. The tea was hot and slightly bitter, smelled of summer meadows, and was given in small cups through the night. When aspirin became reliably available in rural pharmacies by the 1910s and the 1920s, the case for brewing tea at midnight weakened considerably. Yarrow never became a commercial product. It stayed in the garden, dried every August, stored in labeled jars, used in January when the roads were too icy to go anywhere for help. Lard-based herbal chest rub. Long before any commercial chest rub existed, Amish households rendered lard from the autumn pig slaughter and combined it with herbs for winter illness. Camphor, dried thyme, and in some Pennsylvania German and Appalachian variations, a small amount of pine resin turpentine were worked into soft lard and stored in small tins near the washstand. Turpentine as a topical medicinal ingredient sounds alarming now, but in the 18th and 19th centuries, it was a documented external preparation for respiratory ailments, recorded in both folk and formal medical literature. The lard melted against the skin with body warmth, and the aromatic compounds volatilized in the heat, creating the same mentholated vapor that any commercial chest rub today tries to replicate. The homemade version disappeared as petroleum-based commercial products became cheap and widely distributed in the 1930s and the 1940s. It smelled like a working farm in winter, in a way that nothing with a printed label ever quite managed. Switchel. Switchel was a working drink, a haymaker's drink, made from apple cider vinegar, ginger root, molasses or honey, and water. It was served warm in cold weather as a cold remedy, and cold in summer as a field drink. It predates the Amish, going back to colonial New England and the Caribbean trade routes that brought molasses to North American farms in the 17th century. Amish communities in Pennsylvania and Ohio maintained it as a seasonal household practice while mainstream culture set it aside through the mid-20th century, trading the ceramic pitcher for bottled soda and commercial sports drinks. As a cold remedy, it was taken warm, the ginger doing principal work on a raw throat, the molasses providing minerals, the vinegar its mild astringency. You made it in a ceramic pitcher, stirred until the molasses dissolved, and poured it into a heavy mug. The warm mug was part of the medicine, something to hold on to when holding on felt necessary. Echinacea root tea. The purple coneflower was in medicinal use by more than a dozen Native American tribes before European settlement of the eastern woodlands. By the 1880s, patent medicine companies had identified it and were marketing echinacea-based products widely. Amish communities in Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, situated within the plant's natural habitat, incorporated it into household medicine by the late 19th century. The root was dried and simmered into dark tea, taken at the very beginning of illness, when the throat first started to feel thick before a person was fully convinced they were sick. The belief was that it worked on the front end, that its usefulness diminished as illness progressed. Echinacea dropped out of formal American medicine in the 1940s when pharmaceutical antibiotics rose to dominance and plant-based remedies lost institutional credibility. It came back as a supplement in the 1990s and is now among the country's best-selling herbal products. Amish households in Geauga County, Ohio, and Elkhart County, Indiana, never stopped growing it. Pine tar salve. Pine tar, the thick, dark, resinous product of slowly burning pine wood, had a medical history as old as wooden ships. It was used as a livestock antiseptic and a topical preparation for skin conditions, but its role in respiratory care came through its volatile aromatic compounds, the same piney, resinous smell synthesized today into commercial cough drops. Amish families in wooded Pennsylvania and Ohio combined pine tar with soft lard or tallow for a chest salve, applied heavily at night and covered with cloth. Historical records from Appalachian and Pennsylvania German communities document salves combining pine tar, camphor, and mutton tallow as standard winter medicine from the 1700s through the early 1900s. Commercial pine tar soap and ointment were available at general stores by the mid-1800s, and petroleum-based successors replaced both the commercial and homemade versions by mid-century. The smell of pine and fire in a closed winter room was its own kind of presence. Chamomile steam bath. Steam inhalation was a universal cold treatment across European folk traditions, and the Amish maintained it in a form that most households have entirely abandoned. A large pot of water was brought to a full boil. Handfuls of dried chamomile were added, and the sick person sat over the pot with a heavy towel draped over both head and pot to hold the steam in place. 5 to 10 minutes of breathing that warm, floral, slightly medicinal vapor was the standard duration. Chamomile contains azulene and bisabolol, both with anti-inflammatory properties, and the steam itself thinned mucus in swollen nasal passages. Pennsylvania Amish households used it specifically for sinus pressure from head colds. Chamomile appeared on general store price lists in the mid-1800s at a few cents a pound. The treatment declined as central heating replaced open fires and made boiling a pot on demand less practical. And as pharmaceutical decongestants arrived in the mid-20th century, the smell of it was warm and floral and unmistakably of care. Egg white fever socks. If the vinegar socks were the practical version, the egg white socks were the version that suggested old medicine had a logic all its own. Cotton socks soaked in raw egg whites, wrung out, applied to the feet of a feverish person, then covered with a dry outer sock to hold the moisture against the skin. The egg whites were cold from the cellar and the application was immediately cooling, which in a fevered child was often enough to allow rest. Documented in Amish communities in Indiana and Ohio, the practice was understood not just as cooling, but as a drawing remedy. The egg whites believed to pull the heat of the fever out through the feet as the night wore on. It gave way as children's aspirin became the standard household fever intervention after 1899, and later as pediatric acetaminophen made improvised remedies feel unnecessary. The cold application, the settling into a dry bed with the fever slightly less terrible than an hour before, these were small mercies. Most of us have lost that specific knowledge so thoroughly that it feels like something we never had, like it belongs to another people entirely. But it does not. Somewhere in your family, within the last 100 years, someone knew what plant to pick for a sore throat, what to mix in a tin cup at bedtime, what to lay on a child's chest in the night when the cough would not stop. The knowledge did not vanish. It just stopped being passed on. Here is the question I want to leave you with. Not which remedy do you remember, something more specific. What did it smell like? The one remedy your family kept using even after everything else had been replaced. The one that never quite made it to the trash can. because I suspect at least one of you knows exactly what I'm describing, and I suspect the smell is still completely clear.